Every banned thing in the NFL explained in 29 minutes. The head slap. Psychological warfare. The sound of violence. 1960. Before the billion-dollar TV contracts and the pristine corporate shield of the modern era, the NFL was a blood sport. Defensive linemen didn't just want to beat their opponents, they wanted to erase them. And the most terrifying weapon in their arsenal wasn't a play, it was a gesture. The head slap. Imagine a 280-pound Hall of Famer like Deacon Jones lining up across from you. The ball snaps. Before you can even set your feet, a massive open palm strikes the side of your helmet with the force of a car crash. Your world goes white. Your equilibrium vanishes. The mechanics of brutality. Deacon Jones didn't just use the head slap to get past a blocker. He used it to scramble the brain. He called it giving them a headache, but the reality was a true crime committed on the line of scrimmage. It was a calculated strike designed to rattle the inner ear, leaving offensive linemen seeing stars while Jones blew past them to bury the quarterback. It was violence disguised as technique, a human battering ram to the temple. Jones himself admitted the goal was simple: take the fight out of a man before the play even starts. The escalation. By the mid-70s, the death harvest of the trenches had become too much for the league to ignore. Younger players were imitating Jones, turning every snap into a literal graveyard of concussions and shattered eardrums. The head slap had become so effective it was breaking the game's balance. The violence wasn't just a byproduct, it was the marketing, until the body count of post-career trauma began to surface. The ultimatum. The NFL faced a crossroads: keep the savage, unbridled gladiator aesthetic or protect the men under the helmets. In 1977, the league finally stepped in. They didn't just penalize the move, they criminalized it. It became illegal hands to the face, a 15-yard stain on any player's record. The era of the open palm assault was over. The resolution. The ban on the head slap marked the first real crack in the Iron Man era of football. It was the moment the league admitted that violence had a ceiling. Deacon's iconic move was retired forever, forcing the defensive line to evolve from blunt force trauma to tactical finesse. The head slap died so the modern player's brain could survive. Stickum, the molasses trap. The adhesive edge, 1980. In the high-stakes theater of the NFL, the ball is the only currency that matters. But in the late 70s, it wasn't just skill or soft hands that secured the catch. It was a chemical advantage. Enter Stickum, an industrial-grade adhesive so potent it turned human skin into fly paper. This wasn't a minor grip aid. It was a visceral sabotage of the game's physics. The king of the grime. Lester Hayes, the legendary Raiders cornerback, didn't just use Stickum. He wore it like a second skin. He looked like a man who had been dipped in molasses, coating his hands, his forearms, his towels, and even his socks in the amber-colored sludge. He didn't just intercept passes, he harvested them. In 1980, Hayes recorded 13 interceptions, a body count of turnovers fueled by a substance that allowed him to palm a football with the ease of a grapefruit. The escalation. The league was becoming a literal graveyard of integrity. Photos began to circulate of receivers like Fred Biletnikoff, with forearms so saturated they looked like they'd been dragged through a swamp. Opposing teams were furious, returning footballs to the refs that were covered in gray, sticky filth and industrial residue. The game had shifted from a test of athletic prowess to a battle of chemistry. The unbridled use of the substance was making the act of catching and defending a foregone conclusion. The ultimatum. The NFL, obsessed with its polished image, couldn't ignore the mess any longer. In 1981, they issued a decree that effectively ended the jar of honey era. They banned any and all foreign adhesive substances. The Lester Hayes rule was born, stripping the adhesive villains of their chemical edge and forcing them back into the realm of raw, human capability. The resolution. Today, the NFL allows high-tech sticky gloves that offer incredible grip, but the era of the literal sludge is dead. The Stickum ban was a pivotal moment in the league's history, a transition from a dirty, industrial past to the clean, marketed perfection of the modern game. The glue was gone, but the obsession with control had only just begun. Celebration props, the corporate muzzle, the optical assault. 2003. For decades, the end zone was a sanctuary, a place of raw, unbridled emotion. But by the early 2000s, it had transformed into a theater of the absurd. The NFL, a billion-dollar machine built on order and discipline, found itself facing a new kind of insurrection, the hidden prop. Players were no longer content with a simple spike. They wanted to hijack the broadcast, turning the scoring play into a cinematic stunt. The tipping point. December 14th, 2003. Joe Horn of the New Orleans Saints scores a touchdown, runs to the goalpost padding, and pulls out a hidden flip phone. He dials a number. He takes a call in front of millions. It wasn't just a celebration. It was a security breach of the league's carefully curated image. Before that, Terrell Owens had already desecrated the Dallas Cowboys' sacred star at midfield and pulled a Sharpie from his sock to autograph a ball. The end zone was becoming a literal stage for ego, and the league executives were losing their minds. The escalation. This was a visceral challenge to the league's authority. Every Sunday brought the threat of a new gimmick. Pom-poms, cell phones, Sharpies, even cheerleading stunts. The NFL, fearing a total collapse of decorum, decided that if they couldn't control the players' creativity, they would kill it. The death harvest of fun began, and the league earned a new dark moniker, the No Fun League. The ultimatum. The crackdown was swift and merciless. The league issued a total ban on any foreign objects or pre-planned group demonstrations. If you pulled a prop, you didn't just get a flag, you got a 5-figure hit to your bank account. The message was clear. The logo on the jersey mattered more than the man inside it. The end zone was reclaimed by the corporate shield. The resolution. While the rules have softened slightly in recent years to allow choreographed dancing, the ban on props remains a permanent scar on the game's history. You can dance with your teammates, but reach for a phone or a marker, and you'll find yourself in a literal graveyard of fines. The NFL chose the polished brand over the individual, ensuring that no player would ever be bigger than the game again. The horse collar, the human parachute, the snap of the bone. 2004. Football is a game of pursuit, but in the early 2000s, that pursuit began ending in a morbidity that even the most hardened fans couldn't stomach. It was called the horse collar tackle. A defender trailing a runner would reach out, hook the back inside of the shoulder pads, and rip the player backward. It wasn't a tackle. It was a mechanical failure of the human body. The mechanics of the ledge pull. The physics were visceral and unforgiving. As the runner's upper body was jerked violently backward, their lower half continued to sprint forward at full speed. This created a literal trap for the legs. The knees would buckle. The ankles would twist under the weight of the momentum, and the sound of snapping ligaments would echo through the stadium. It was a human parachute deployment that didn't save lives. It ended seasons. The body count. The death harvest of 2004 was the tipping point. Dallas Cowboys safety Roy Williams had turned the move into a lethal trademark, but the cost was becoming too high. In a single season, the league's biggest stars were being dismantled. Most notably, Terrell Owens was yanked down by the collar, resulting in a fractured fibula and torn ligaments. The injury wasn't just a setback, it was a cinematic horror show played out on national television. The ultimatum. The NFL realized this wasn't just tough football, it was a blood sport that threatened its most valuable assets. In 2005, the league issued a 15-yard mandate, effectively criminalizing the move. They didn't just ban the technique, they branded it as a non-football act. If you grabbed the inside of the collar and pulled down, the whistle didn't just blow, the league's moral hammer came down with it. The resolution. The horse collar ban was a pivotal shift in the sport's DNA. It was the first major rule change where the NFL prioritized orthopedic survival over defensive aggression. It opened the floodgates for a decade of safety-first regulations, forever changing how defenders are allowed to interact with the human body. The ledge pull died so that the league's stars could keep walking. The wedge block, the human snowplow, the collision course. 2009. Kickoff returns were once the Wild West of the gridiron, a high-speed, high-stakes game of chicken. But by the late 2000s, they had evolved into a literal demolition derby. The strategy was simple and terrifying. The wedge block. 3 or 4 300-pound linemen would lock shoulder to shoulder, forming a human battering ram that sprinted full speed ahead of the returner. It wasn't a play. It was a visceral wall of meat and bone designed to crush anything in its path. The death harvest of the kickoff. The physics of the wedge were ominous and lethal. Imagine being on the coverage team, sprinting 40 yards at top speed, only to collide with 1,000 pounds of stationary force. The result was a body count of medical emergencies. Helmets shattered, spines compressed, and necks snapped back with the violence of a car wreck. By 2009, the NFL's internal data revealed a literal graveyard of safety. More concussions and catastrophic injuries were happening on kickoffs than on any other play in the game. The escalation. This was a morbidity crisis the league couldn't ignore. The kickoff, once the most exciting play in football, had become a death trap. The sight of players lying motionless on the turf after hitting the wedge was becoming a weekly occurrence. The league realized that the unbridled violence of the four-man wall was unsustainable. They were no longer playing a game. They were managing a mass casualty event every Sunday. The ultimatum. In 2009, the NFL delivered a death sentence to the wedge. They decreed that no more than 2 players could stand shoulder to shoulder on a kickoff return. Any more than that, and the whistle would blow. It was an unprecedented intervention into the mechanics of the game, a calculated move to dismantle the snowplow before it claimed another career. The resolution. The ban on the wedge block was the beginning of the end for the kickoff as we knew it. It signaled a shift from raw, unbridled chaos to a sanitized, safer product. Today, the wedge is a relic of a more brutal era, a reminder of a time when the NFL was willing to sacrifice the human body for a few extra yards of field position. The snowplow stopped, and the No Fun League took one more step toward the polished safety of the modern era. Custom cleats, the fashion police, the policing of style. 2010. In the modern NFL, the logo on your jersey is a sacred contract, and the colors on your feet are a matter of state security. The league doesn't just regulate how you play, it regulates your drip with the cold precision of a military inspection. For decades, the cleats on a player's feet had to be a polished extension of the team's uniform. Base colors only, no gradients, no personal flair. To the NFL, an off-brand logo or a loud color wasn't just a fashion choice. It was a visceral assault on their billion-dollar advertising partnerships. The fashion fugitives, players like Chad Johnson and Marshawn Lynch, became the primary villains in this war against the dress code. Johnson, the ultimate provocateur, was hit with a $20,000 fine, the highest for a uniform violation at the time, simply for wearing gold cleats in a matchup against the Steelers. Marshawn Lynch faced an even darker ultimatum. When he stepped onto the field in all gold cleats, officials gave him a literal choice between his shoes and his job. Change them at halftime, or you don't play. It was a true crime investigation into footwear, with refs doubling as fashion police. The escalation of the ego. The conflict reached a cinematic peak with Odell Beckham Jr. In 2019, he took the field in custom Joker cleats, a vibrant, glittery explosion of purple and red that mocked the league's strict aesthetic. The NFL didn't wait for the post-game report, they sent a notice mid-game. Change the shoes or you're finished. This was the unbridled power of the league on display, willing to bench a superstar over a paint job while millions watched. The field had become a literal graveyard of individuality. The ultimatum. The backlash was a morbidity for the league's PR. Fans and players alike began to turn on the No Fun League, calling out the absurdity of fining a player $5,000 for wearing purple cleats to honor domestic violence awareness. The NFL realized that their rigid control was creating a body count of negative headlines. They needed a release valve before the players revolted. The resolution. In 2016, the league finally bent. They introduced My Cause, My Cleats, a controlled one-week window where players are permitted to be individuals. It was a calculated move to sanitize the rebellion, turning raw expression into a marketed charity event. Today, you can wear the art, but only when the schedule says so. Outside of those weeks, the uniform tyranny remains absolute. The Joker shoes are banned, the gold is gone, and the corporate shield remains the only thing allowed to shine. The Fumble Rooski, the illegal genius, the stealth heist. 1984. In the calculated, chess-like world of the NFL, there is no room for schoolyard deception. But once, a play existed that turned the gridiron into a theater of the absurd. It was the Fumble Rooski, a maneuver designed not to overpower the defense, but to make them vanish. The quarterback would take the snap and, with the stealth of a pickpocket, place the ball on the turf. A planned accident. While the defense swarmed a ghost, a massive offensive guard would scoop the dead ball and thunder in the opposite direction. The mechanics of deceit. This wasn't just a trick, it was a visceral sabotage of the game's logic. In the 1984 Orange Bowl, Nebraska executed this mechanical fraud with lethal precision, catching the defense in a literal trap. While the world watched the wrong man, the ball was being harvested for a touchdown. It was a human battering ram disguised as a mistake, a loophole that proved skill was secondary to a well-timed lie. The escalation. The NFL, obsessed with its polished image of elite competition, saw the fumblerooski as a threat to the sport's structural integrity. If every fumble could be a weapon, the game would descend into unbridled chaos. The death harvest of traditional strategy was imminent. Refs couldn't distinguish a genuine error from a stealth strike, turning the line of scrimmage into a literal graveyard of certainty. The ultimatum. The league office didn't just frown upon the play, they issued a totalitarian rewrite of the rulebook. They decreed that any planned fumble was a dead ball. If the ball hit the dirt by design, the whistle blew. The era of the illegal genius was over. The NFL demanded that if you wanted to advance the ball, you had to do it with the light of day on your side. The resolution. The ban on the fumblerooski marked the end of the creative insurrection. It was a move to sanitize the game, ensuring that every play followed a linear, predictable path. Today, the play is a relic of a craftier time. A reminder that in the NFL, being too smart for the rules is a true crime that carries a permanent sentence. Uniform tyranny, the corporate muzzle, the policing of the persona. 1985. The NFL is a machine that demands total conformity. To the Shield, a player is not a man, he is a marketed asset. In the mid-80s, the uniform tyranny reached a state of morbidity, transforming the locker room into a battleground for identity. It started with Jim McMahon and his rebel headbands, a visceral middle finger to the commissioner's office. McMahon didn't just wear gear, he wore messages, turning his own forehead into a literal billboard of defiance. The font violation. The league's obsession with control descended into the realm of the ridiculous. When Chad Johnson attempted to wear Ocho Cinco on his jersey, the NFL responded with the cold precision of a military tribunal. They cited font violations and issued 5-figure hits to his bank account. It was a true crime investigation into typography, where the shape of a letter was treated with the same gravity as a body count on the field. The league was terrified that if a player owned his name, they would lose their grip on the brand. The numerical lockdown. For decades, the NFL maintained an ominous code for jersey numbers, a hierarchy that stripped players of their collegiate identities. Wide receivers were buried in the 80s, linebackers were trapped in the 50s. It was a morbidity of tradition that killed the drip of the game's biggest stars. This wasn't about the game, it was about the visual lockdown of the corporate image. The ultimatum. In 2021, the league finally broke, but not for the sake of the players. They realized the death harvest of jersey sales was a multi-million-dollar opportunity. They relaxed the rules, allowing single digits to return to the defense. It was a calculated surrender, trading their rigid control for a billion-dollar payday. They didn't give the players freedom, they sold it back to them. The resolution. Today, the uniform tyranny persists in the shadows. You can wear a single digit, but your socks must be a precise height, and your undershirt must be league approved. The NFL remains a polished monolith, where individualism is allowed only if it fits within the dimensions of a corporate contract. The unbridled era of the rebel is dead. The one-bar mask, the human relic, the frailty of steel. 1955. For decades, the NFL player's face was a literal open target. Nothing captures the raw danger of early football quite like the one-bar face mask, a thin strip of metal that looked more like a sinister smile than a piece of safety equipment. It offered zero structural protection. It was a visceral invitation for a stray forearm to shatter a jaw or a finger to gouge an eye. In an era of bloodsport, the one-bar mask was the ultimate badge of a man who didn't fear the body count, the mechanic of the smile. The mask was designed for visibility, not survival. Punters and kickers loved it because it didn't obstruct the view, but the trade-off was a mechanical failure of protection. You could fit a fist through the gap. It left the teeth and nose exposed to the human battering rams of the defensive line. It was an ominous gamble played out on every snap. The ultimatum. In 2004, the NFL issued a death sentence to the single bar. They realized that vintage cool was a liability that threatened the league's polished future. They banned the mask for all new players, but allowed a few time travelers to be grandfathered in. This led to the rise of the human relic, Scott Player, the last man to wear the forbidden steel until 2009. He stood on the field as a living ghost of a more brutal, less regulated past. The resolution. When the last one-bar mask retired, it was buried in the literal graveyard of history. Today, helmets are high-tech fortresses of carbon fiber and foam. The one-bar mask remains a museum piece, a reminder of a time when the NFL was willing to gamble with the visceral reality of a shattered face for the sake of a clear view. Deflategate, the seizure of the sphere, the manipulation of the tool. 2014, in the cold world of the NFL, the ball is the literal heart of the play. But in the 2014 AFC Championship, that heart was under attack. Deflategate wasn't just a scandal, it was a mechanical sabotage of the game's core physics. The New England Patriots were accused of systematically draining the air from their footballs, a heist of the rules performed in the shadows of a stadium bathroom. The mechanic of the squeeze. The goal was a visceral advantage. A slightly deflated ball is easier to palm, easier to grip in the freezing rain, and more human-friendly for a quarterback. It was a chemical and physical theft of the game's integrity. The NFL's investigation found a body count of underinflated balls. 11 of 12 failed the test. The death harvest of the Patriots' reputation had begun. The ultimatum. The response was a federal-level drama. Suspensions were issued. Lawsuits were filed, and the league's moral hammer came down with cinematic cruelty. The NFL realized that allowing teams to handle their own balls had created a literal graveyard of trust. They issued a total lockdown. From that moment on, every game ball would be a seized asset, logged and guarded by league officials like evidence in a murder trial. The resolution. Today, the unbridled freedom of the quarterback to prep his own tools is dead. The ball is a polished, regulated object, untouched by the players until the moment of the snap. Deflategate changed the DNA of the game, proving that the NFL would rather seize total control than risk a single pound of missing air. The visual lockdown, the chrome cartel, the blinding advantage. 2016. In a league built on optics, light is a weapon. The reflective cleat was more than a fashion statement, it was a visceral distraction. Chrome-plated shoes that caught the stadium lights could send a blinding glare into an opponent's eyes, a mechanical sabotage of the visual field. To the NFL, this wasn't art, it was an optical assault on the game's balance. The fashion fugitives, superstars like Odell Beckham Jr. and Cam Newton became the primary targets of the chrome crackdown. When Beckham stepped out in iridescent cleats, the NFL didn't wait for a post-game fine. They delivered a mid-game ultimatum: change the shoes or face a literal ejection. This was the uniform tyranny in its most cinematic form, the league policing the very light reflecting off a player's feet. The resolution. The league issued a totalitarian ban on any reflective materials or off-brand logos. Every cleat and every visor must now pass a polished inspection. The NFL ensured that the only thing allowed to shine on Sunday is the corporate logo. The unbridled creativity of the players was buried in a literal graveyard of branding. The no taunting rule, the policing of passion, the criminalization of confidence. 2021. The NFL loves a rivalry, but they hate the unbridled emotion that comes with it. The 2021 no taunting mandate was a visceral assault on the game's personality. A finger pointed in a sprint, a stare down after a sack. These were reclassified as moral transgressions. The league turned the 15-yard penalty into a literal muzzle, fining players for existing too loudly. The ultimatum. The irony was cinematic. The NFL would flag a player for a peace sign, then use that same footage to sell the game to millions. It was a morbidity of hypocrisy. The death harvest of fun was absolute, as the league prioritized a family-friendly broadcast over the raw, visceral reality of the sport. The resolution. Today, the end zone is a sanitized stage. The no taunting rule remains a permanent scar on the game's soul. A reminder that in the NFL, you can bleed for the shield, but you cannot celebrate your survival. Charisma has been buried in a literal graveyard of fines, leaving only the polished corporate product behind. Towel size, the geometry of control, the regulation of the rag. 2000. You know the uniform tyranny has reached a state of morbidity when the league begins measuring the fabric hanging from a player's waist. The NFL doesn't just care about your shoes or your helmet, they care about your towel. For decades, players used towels as visual flair, tucking them in like flags or using extra long fabric for a cinematic effect. But to the league office, an uncurated towel was a mechanical liability and a branding nightmare. The mechanics of the grip. The ban was fueled by visceral paranoia. Defenders were using long towels as literal handles, yanking players down by the waist. Some players were sabotaging the game's physics by soaking their towels in mud or water to mess with an opponent's grip. It was a low-tech heist taking place in the heat of the game. The league realized that if they didn't standardize the cloth, the unbridled variation would lead to a literal mess on the field and the broadcast. The ultimatum. The NFL issued a totalitarian dimension code. Every towel must be league-issued, white, and fall within a precise length and width. It must be positioned in the front center of the waistband, no exceptions. If a player tried to wear a beast mode towel or a personalized message, the fashion police were there to deliver a financial execution. The towel was no longer a tool for the player. It was a marketed accessory for the sponsor. The resolution. The towel ban is the ultimate proof of the league's obsession with the polished look. Even the most insignificant piece of fabric is a branded asset in the NFL's billion-dollar machine. The unbridled era of the personal towel is dead, buried under a mountain of precise measurements and corporate logos. The lightning round, the literal graveyard of gimmicks, the swift execution, ongoing. The NFL's death harvest of creativity never sleeps. In the shadows of the rulebook, a dozen smaller bands have turned the locker room into a literal minefield of fines. These are the visceral snapshots of a league that refuses to blink. A final look at the body count of forbidden flair. The grinning assassin, Odell Beckham Jr., attempted to wear an emoji mouthguard with a tongue sticking out. The NFL saw it as a visceral assault on their polished image and killed it instantly. To the Shield, a smile on a mouthguard isn't a joke. It's an unapproved modification of a safety device. The message was sent: your face is our property. The scripted stare. For years, players like Tim Tebow used eye black as a literal billboard for faith, family, or defiance. The league saw unbridled messaging and issued a total visual blackout. No words, no numbers, no soul. If you want to speak, do it in a post-game press conference, not on your skin. Your face must remain a blank canvas for the corporate brand. The tactical cloak. James Jones made the hoodie under the pads a cinematic trademark. The NFL, fearing a mechanical safety risk and an unapproved silhouette, stripped the hoods from the players' backs. They cited grab risks, but the reality was a visceral need to maintain the uniform's structural purity. The hoodie was a rebel's cloak, and the league doesn't tolerate shadows. The flesh fine. Even the kneecap is a battleground. The league demands a polished leg line, mandating that pants cover the knee at all times. If a player dares to show a visceral inch of skin, they are met with a 5-figure hit. It is the morbidity of micromanagement, a league so obsessed with control that it will fine a man for the length of his trousers while he risks his life for their profit. The final resolution. The NFL is no longer a blood sport played by individuals. It is a cinematic production managed by a corporate cartel. Every band, from the head slap to the size of a towel, is a brick in the wall of the no-fun league. The unbridled chaos of the past has been replaced by the polished safety of the present. The history of the NFL is a literal graveyard of forbidden plays and banned gear. A reminder that in this game, the only thing that truly survives is the shield.